Hello and welcome to Padre's Corner. It's the Twitch show where, well, we put you in the mind of a Padre and see if you come out sane an hour later. I'm Father Robert Ballas here, the digital Jesuit known as Padre SJ in the Twit TV chat room. And for the next hour or so, I'm going to take you through some of the news that has fallen through the geek cracks here at Twit TV. Now, we got to start off with some breaking news. I know there's a lot of people who are kind of freaking out right now because a judgment has just been handed down in the latest round of Samsung Apple legal chit-chat. Whatever we're going to be calling this, this is what just happened. So we know that right now Samsung has been found to infringe on a few Apple patents, and they are being awarded $119 million. At the same time, we know that Samsung successfully countersued, and they were awarded a much lower sum, about $158,000. This happened here in San Jose over the last couple of days, 3 days actually to be exact. It sounds a lot like a repeat of the court case, the landmark court case last year that awarded Apple over $1 billion in damages and found that none of the Samsung patents were infringed. But this is actually vastly different. We know that Apple wanted over $2 billion. We know that Samsung didn't expect to get anything. So the fact that the award was cut, not just a little bit, but by a lot, 1/20th, in fact, is what they were actually awarded, tells you that maybe people are getting a little tired of the lawsuits. This reminds me a lot of what happened during the Apple-Microsoft lawsuits back in the 1980s. For those of you who weren't around, read up on Wikipedia. It's actually a fascinating read because you see it again. Tech company that is on top, tech company that has a lot of innovation, a tech company that has a lot of admirers who then turns to lawsuits, eventually exhausts its appetite for lawsuits, and then settles out, then does cross-licensing agreements because they realize if they mire themselves in lawsuits for too long, they're going to allow the competitors an entry. Hopefully, that's the start of it. Now, this is not the end of these cases. We're going to see a lot more of them. In fact, I'm pretty sure Apple is going to appeal this case. They're going to want a much bigger reward out of the patents that they sued for. So the war will continue, and Apple and Samsung fanboys will continue to have something to argue about when they want to do their quasi-informed legal onanism. All right, now let's move to something that's a bit more important than a couple of companies duking it out over a few $1 billion that we pay. Specifically, I want to talk about getting older. I want to talk about an illness. I want to talk about something that is affecting millions of people, not just in the United States, but around the world. Put yourself in this situation. Let's say you're an elderly geek. You're in your late 60s, maybe your early 70s. Now, you've lived a good life. You've had a productive life. You've trying to now to relax in your golden years, to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So you're catching up on all the hours of Minecraft that you've missed while you were a professional. Maybe you're getting back into programming. Maybe you're trying that new garden. Maybe you're even playing a couple of rounds of golf because you realize that the sun is actually not going to kill you. Life is good. And yes, you are now reaping the results of all those years of labor. But as you get older, as you age, as you start to enjoy these labors of your golden years, you've noticed that your motor skills aren't quite what they used to be. It started with a slight tremor in your hands. It became difficult to draw, to sign your name, to play golf. Eventually, you have almost no strength in your fingers. Not enough to play your games, not enough to type, definitely not enough to go outside. Now, you go to your doctor, and he confirms a diagnosis that you think is just the end of the world. It's Parkinson's, which we know is a degenerative disease that will eventually kill you. Now, we know that this is a disease that affects millions. We know that it affects over 1.2 million in just the United States and Canada alone. We know that it's a disease that costs United States taxpayers about $10,000 a person to treat per year. And it burdens the United States economy with about $23 billion in unpaid medical bills. But here's the good thing. We may have a treatment. That's right. Parkinson's is a progressive disease, becoming worse and worse over the years, and it has a devastating effect on the people who are supposed to be living those golden years. But this treatment looks at what's causing it. Specifically, it looks at the parts of the brain that are misfiring and causing the symptoms of Parkinson's. Now, this treatment, wonderfully, involves a room of doctors, a giant robot, a tiny little brain probe, and patients who stay awake while RoboDoc drills into their heads. I know it sounds kind of futuristic, but believe it or not, this surgery has been done over 100,000 times. This procedure is called DBS, deep brain stimulation. Now, stay with me because the facts of this procedure are just ridiculously fascinating. Imagine this. We have a procedure that goes into a patient's brain and implants tiny little electrodes. We know that this has some sort of effect on the brain. We know that for some reason this allows patients to regain some of the motor skills, but we don't really know how. We know that the electrodes deliver very small electrical currents that reduce or eliminate the symptoms of Parkinson's, Tourette's, and certain obsessive-compulsive disorders. Now, researchers are currently looking into the potential for DBS to treat PTSD and Alzheimer's, but this treatment, well, again, it does sound like something out of science fiction. Researchers believe that the many motor memory function disorders are the result of abnormal conversations going on between different parts of the brain. Now, the probe on this robot that you see in the picture allows them to spy on different parts of the brain. It listens for these abnormal conversations. The procedure starts with the patient's head being immobilized, as you can see in that giant ring, and then their head is scanned. Once the skull is open, about a dime-sized hole is drilled into the skull. A tiny wire probe is guided into the brain so that they can find out where these misfiring neurons are. The patient needs to be awake because the team will touch different parts of his or her body to figure out where those conversations are triggered in the brain. In other words, when they're listening to the brain, as you can see on the scan here, they can see what's connected to your fingers, what's connected to your toes, what's connected to your thigh, because those parts of the brain will light up with electrical energy when they touch those corresponding parts of the body. So here's how it works. Once the doctor figures out where these abnormal conversations are happening, they use the probe and the computer-guided needle to insert tiny electrodes into those parts of the brains that are experiencing abnormal conversations. Once they place those electrodes and current starts to flow between them, it normalizes the electrical potential and it keeps the conversations from happening. Now, amazingly, what they found is that just by inducing a little bit of electrical current and keeping the battery below the chest, they can almost completely eliminate the symptoms of Parkinson's. But that's not all. They think that this technology, that this treatment may actually work for people who are suffering from Alzheimer's, people who are suffering from Tourette's, people who are suffering from bipolar disorder. In other words, if it has to do with the brain, you may be seeing DBS coming to an operating room near you. Now, when we come back, I am going to introduce our honored guest. You know him, you love him, Dr. Rodney McKay from Stargate, but no, we know him as David Hewlett. He is a writer, an actor, a director, and a producer. He's a man about all arts, and he's going to show you the secrets to sci-fi. But before we do that, I thought maybe now might be a good time for the tech. This time I thought we should take a look at a review I did a while back of a 27-inch monitor. Now, before you start saying, well, I've heard about 27-inch monitors before, imagine a monitor that wasn't just big, but wide. It's the AOC 27-incher.
Maybe you have a big monitor. Maybe you have a widescreen monitor. Maybe you have a lot of monitors. But do you have a big widescreen monitor with enough screen real estate to make all the rest of your monitors look puny? That's about the size of the AOC Q2963PM ultra-wide display, an entry in the growing field of monitors that break away from the conventional 16:9 aspect ratio. The AOC Q2963PM houses an impressive 29-inch IPS panel that supports 2560 by 1080 resolution. For those playing along at home, that's WFHD, a 21:9 aspect ratio, really close to the ratio used in movie theaters. AOC claims that the 21:9 aspect ratio of the Q2963PM allows users to watch movies in their true movie format, without black bars bracketing the picture. That's kinda cool, but saying the Q2963PM is a mouthful, so I'm just gonna call it Sir Screen-A-Lot. Though not the thinnest or lightest display we've seen, Sir Screen-A-Lot features a narrow bezel and a cabinet that has aluminum trim, a no-smudge matte finish, detachable weighted base, simple control buttons, 3-watt stereo speakers, 40 degrees of tilt, and a hidden VESA mount. AOC packed the monitor with plenty of input options, VGA, dual DVI, HDMI, and DisplayPort, in addition to the standard audio in and out. Sir Screen-A-Lot also features a DisplayPort output, which means that you can daisy-chain multiple DisplayPort monitors. Finally, the unit supports MHL, which means that you can plug your MHL-enabled device directly into the monitor, and not only will it display, but the monitor will charge your device. In use, I found Sir Screen-A-Lot to be a fantastic monitor. The 5-millisecond response time made it suitable for gaming, while the 21:9 ratio is a natural fit for video editing, movie watching, or really wide spreadsheets. The IPS panel offers impressive color reproduction and excellent image quality, with a 178-degree viewing angle from left to right. AOC used the plethora of inputs to great effect by building picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture modes into the monitor, allowing you to drop a second input either within the full frame or divide the full frame into equally sized screens. Overall, I found Sir Screen-a-Lot to be a fast, clear, accurate display loaded with every port you could ask for and packed with the features that most geeks crave. I did notice significant color shifting when viewing from the top or bottom of the screen, and the plastic bezel is sometimes comically weak, but the list of features and the price of this ultra-wide monitor is probably going to be attractive to the content creator or gamer who wants a little more out of their displays. The AOC Q2963PM is available now with a 3-year warranty. You can find it online for about $400.
I really like playing with that monitor. I know it's a weird aspect ratio. I know that a lot of programs aren't designed to take advantage of it, but I think we're going to see more devices like that. And that one was priced right for someone who doesn't want to drop $1,000 or more on the monitor of their choice. Now let's stop talking about monitors. Let's talk about stars. No, I'm not just talking about people in Hollywood. I'm talking about the stars out in space and the people who understand them the most because they've traveled among them. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to the show a man who I hold great respect for and who, well, holds a special place in my sci-fi heart, Mr. David Hewlett. David, thank you so very much for being on Padre's Corner. It's great to have you here.
I'm never going to live up to that introduction. That was amazing.
That's what we do here. That's how we
17-inch monitor, I mean.
You know, everyone needs a good 17-inch monitor every once in a while.
That's it. That's it.
Now, David, we brought you on because you are such an icon in the sci-fi space. I mean, everyone knows the works that you've done. Everyone knows the content that you've been a part of, and it's been something throughout the years. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started your career? I mean, what brought you into acting in the first place?
It was actually, I mean, it was friends, basically. I mean, I was a huge Doctor Who fan from way back when, and I basically wasn't smart enough to figure out that I couldn't be a Time Lord when I grew up, and then met a bunch of friends who made little films, and I was like, well, wait a second, I could pretend to be a Time Lord. That would work out much better for me, and probably pay better. So we started making these little films just when we were about 13 years old, and Vincenzo is still making films today. In fact, he's just done 2 episodes of Hannibal, and works all the time. And it's just been an incredibly sort of fun ride because of that. Because it started off as a kid thing, and then I sort of as I got older, I managed to just sort of keep doing it, and people started paying me for it. So it's quite a fun way in.
It's quite something to be able to be to get paid for something that you'd probably do for free.
Yeah, it's don't tell anybody that, because of course I wouldn't work for free. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's especially when you get into it with friends, when you're not by yourself on that stuff. So it was always sort of this little community of film nerds that I got to sort of run with, and they really got me into it. But certainly Doctor Who was the first inkling that perhaps I should I would have more fun in my life pretending to be other people.
Okay, wait. I got to ask. Who is your doctor?
I was from Pertwee to Tom Baker, but Tom Baker was the guy. I was there, he had that perfect combination of sort of irreverence and humor, and yet still managed those bug eyes. Just managed to really sell me on the fear and terror. So,
yeah, I think Baker was my first doctor as well, and I don't think there is anything more divisive in the sci-fi universe than which doctor is the best doctor.
Well, they say, yeah, you never forget your first doctor. I think that was a T-shirt I see at basically every convention.
Right. And the funny thing is, I see from people now who they talk the same way about Smith or Tennant the way that I talk about Baker.
I got to say, Matt Smith is like my favorite of the new guys, because he definitely had a Baker-like quality to him. I hate him. He's just great. Good combination again of comedy and peril, and I really enjoyed his stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about where you came from. So you were actually born in the UK, right? You were born in Red Hill, Surrey, and then you moved to Canada. When did you move to Canada?
I would have been, I think, 4 years old. I think it was. Yeah, I was 4 years. We came over on this Russian boat of some sort. All I remember is this very dark room where they put the kids and we watched these bizarre cartoons that I couldn't understand because they were all in Russian. The Alexander Pushkin, I think, was the name of the boat we came over on.
Wait. I'm sorry. Where's the Russian coming from?
I have no idea. I guess it was, I think, knowing where my poor parents were at that point, the poor part being important. I think it was like the cheapest way of getting there was this Russian cruise ship or something. So I just remember these. I remember a terrible storm, everyone throwing up, and I remember this little dark room with these weird Russian cartoons. Traumatized for life by my trip to Canada.
So in other words, now you can associate being seasick with Russian.
Yes. My idea of Canada is a Russian accent.
Okay. All right. So now you arrive in Canada, and well, I grew up with an immigrant experience, and so I have a little bit of experience with that. But what was it like completely transplanting yourself? I mean, it's a different culture, it's a different place. Any of your old interests, do they carry over? What's great, I think, about kids in general, and I'm seeing this with Sebastian, my son, who's 6 now, so he's a couple years older than I was when I moved over, but is just how it's all new, so it's all normal to them, if that makes sense. Like anything that happens, they just drink it up. I mean, it's just, so for me, it was just, I just assumed that was what happened. I assumed that everyone just hopped on a boat when they were 4 and, heard a lot of Russian and then ended up in Canada. So, but I grew up in Toronto, and Toronto was just, when you're young, winter is fabulous and summers are fabulous, and then you get older and start complaining about the snow and the rain and all that kind of stuff. But I'm back in Toronto again now, mainly because of the film industry and also the schools. I mean, Baz is just in a fantastic school up here, so. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Canada. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I can actually remember the day I was in high school. We were talking about the X-Files, and we were talking about how the X-Files were filmed up in Canada. Yeah. And it was the first time that I started thinking, wait a minute, they make sci-fi content in places other than in the United States. I mean, I had a really, really small view of what the world was back then, but it really made me think, oh, wow, they film a lot of these really cool programs up north. It's bizarre. I mean, it's bizarre and it's not bizarre. I mean, I remember that sort of epiphany myself where I was like, wait a second, they have to shoot these somewhere. Like they don't actually, go to all those places when they shoot them. The fact that, the Doctor Who, you started recognizing, trees and things. God knows Stargate's good for that. So you can sort of see us running past the same, broken logs every week, basically. But I've completely forgotten what I was going to say, but I think the fact that they shoot so much in Canada is partially to do with the fact that there's like tax credits, there's funds for shooting up here. I mean, it's really very supported. It's a very sort of, in a way, government supported process up here. And another reason why I'm up here again is because as a Canadian, I'm able to sort of take advantage of that kind of stuff. And when it comes to film and television, any advantage you can get, to get a little bit more money to get things on screen, you do that. So, and science fiction, there's usually a lot to get on screen. Right. There's always going to be people who are going to say, oh, well, if Canada gives tax credits, they're buying the movie industry, etc. But I think you're right on, which is when you're a content creator, when you just want to make something, you're going to find any way to do it. And if the government of Canada wants to help you make content in their country, then you make content in their country. It's that simple. I mean, I definitely see both sides of it. I mean, there's a part of it that goes like, we should be able to stand on our own 2 feet and just the Canadian system really need to be supported. But I think, with Canada is so close to the States that it basically just becomes an extra state to America sometimes. And a lot of countries have the same issue. I remember when we made Cube, and we showed Cube down in Mexico. We were in Mexico City. And, so many people would come up and say, like, you guys get it. You're just above America. We're just below America. And we're different people. And we, obviously Mexico is a much more sort of rich, more visually different culture than what you see in Canada. And Canada, I think, tends to get sort of added to America in a lot of people's minds because it doesn't have any sort of striking difference, in their people or their, culture, really, basically. By the way, I should notice that in the chat room, we have a huge contingent of Canadians. You are very well represented in the Twit TV audience, and right now they're going back and forth. It's friendly banter. Canada is the hat of the United States. Someone called the United States the underpants of Canada. So, yeah, I think plenty of love to go back there.
Well, this is the weird thing is that having sort of, I was born in England, and we spent a lot of time in England, growing up with grandparents and that sort of stuff. So I basically bounce all over the place, really. So.
All right. You mentioned Cube. Let's talk a little bit about your corpus of works. Your first mainstream break, was for a TV series called The Edison Twins back in.
That's right.
Now, what character did you play? It was one episode appearance.
I remember well. It was one episode. I think I had like 2 scenes, and I was Howard the bully. And I came in. I had these very big boots that I brought myself, and I knocked over the cameraman by accident because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know why he was there. And yes, and I was a very scary bully. And I was so excited. I thought this was it. I was like, why go back to school? Here comes fame and fortune.
Now, when you audition for something like that, how do you have to go into it? I mean, again, you're spilling your secrets out to the internets here. If people wanted to get involved in that kind of work, I mean, obviously there's talent involved. Obviously there's a lot of hard work involved. But what kind of mindset do you have? I mean, as you said, for a moment you said, oh, this is it. Drop everything. Why would I go back to school? This is my career. But what would you suggest to someone who wanted to break in?
It's so funny because it's very different now than it was when I started. And yet I was very lucky in that as a sort of a strange coincidence, I ended up again making films with friends, which not a lot of people did back then because it was a lot more difficult. Nowadays, there's no excuse. I mean, if you want to be an actor, you should be shooting scenes. You should be getting yourself out there. I mean, YouTube, get yourself a channel, start being seen by people, because truly that is where they're going to start pulling talent. It's incredibly exciting to me. People ask me how to become an actor. It used to be you had to do plays and then convince agents to come and see plays and then hopefully get some work and maybe be able to put that on a tape and send that to people. Now you can grab a DSLR and shoot something that looks just as good as any episode of CSI or whatever's out there and show off that way. And just the more you do it, the better you get at it. I mean, I think it's one of those things that people assume is some kind of innate talent, but the reality is everyone acts. I mean, everyone has that mask by the door before they go outside, and it's just a matter of sort of tapping into that and sort of getting comfortable with the camera, getting comfortable with the techniques and tricks that help you convince people that you're somebody else or somewhere else.
I love that idea of just shooting with your friends because, as you mentioned, I think we're seeing that a lot now. We're seeing that with different groups, especially down in Los Angeles right now, who they represent 2 or 3 different entities, but they've become friends and they help each other in the productions. But I want to go above like the YouTube creator. Isn't that essentially what Sci-Fi has become? I mean, one of the wonderful things I love about that channel is you see some of the same actors over and over and over again. It's like they have this acting pool, and the entire channel is one big bit of fan service where people get to see their favorite characters come back in different movies, different series over and over.
Science fiction is very good about that. I think partially because, I mean, the fans are so incredibly loyal and excited and they follow you. I mean, there's, I go to things and have people come up to me who used to watch, Kung Fu: The Legend Continues and now they've moved on to Stargate. And I mean, there's just, I suppose it's not really science fiction, but so the genre type stuff, specifically science fiction, you get to build an audience in a way so that you become valuable to other shows because you have this other following. And it's especially with Stargate, which I remember Amanda Tapping coming up to me after like the first day of shooting and said, "So you ready for this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I got this down." And then suddenly realized what she meant about 2 months later, and I'm standing at San Diego Comic-Con going, "Oh my God, the room's packed, and we haven't even shown a show yet."
Oh, you talked a little bit about this in one of your behind-the-scene looks at State of Sin, where you were talking about that there's something different about the sci-fi audience. Not a lot of people can put their thumb on it, but there is a crazy loyalty that you see in sci-fi that you don't see in a lot of other genres. Where does that come from?
It's so funny because I always sort of joke that if I wasn't, a part of science fiction, I would be a part of science fiction fandom because as I say, I grew up on Doctor Who. I didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to be a Time Lord. And I feel like I understand that from people. There's something about science fiction. There's a kind of an acceptance to it. It accepts all race, religion, colors, creeds, everything basically, and makes them wonderful in their uniqueness. Everything is, every alien race you run into is just a new form of life to either defeat or to embrace or and explore. I think that the type of audience it brings in are the types of people who are passionate about their interests and their love of the genre basically. As it gets later, I make more and more less and less sense, I think. But I think that science fiction fans are into that wonderful sense of escape that you get from science fiction stories, and as such, I think it becomes more than just something they watch. It becomes a part of their life, and it certainly has for me. I mean, that's I can think of nothing better than to be a science fiction fan who gets to make science fiction.
Now let's talk about that, because one of the things that you emailed me was, when you do My Lower Third, could you make sure that you include writer? Because that's what I'm spending a lot of my time in now. And there seems to be this natural progression where when someone really gets comfortable in their craft, they move from actor, then maybe they do some directing, maybe some producing, and then the really good ones end up writing, because what's in their head just pours out on paper, and it makes sense because they understand how stories should unfold. What was that transition like for you to become a writer?
Oh, I think the smart ones get into producing. I think that's probably. Okay. I think it's just the rest of us fools end up going into writing. It was one of those things I always dabbled in. Like I always wrote, but I never thought of myself as a writer particularly. I always had these wonderful sort of imagined what it would be like to be a writer in that sort of actory way. But actors are very good at pretending to do things. They're not necessarily so good at sort of following them up. That's part of the fun of being an actor, is you get to flip from sort of personality to personality, from job to job. So the writing I would sort of do in fits and starts. And then I just found, having done television as long as I had, that I just wanted some more control, basically. I wanted to just try some stuff out myself and see what I was capable of and really just if it was going to be something I wanted to do. And then we did A Dog's Breakfast with my wife Jane, who produced it, and my sister and Paul McGillian from the show and Chris Judd. I mean, just a fantastic, all the cast and crew of Stargate, basically. But it was just to see if it was something I wanted to do, and I absolutely got the bug. I loved it. I loved that you could write something, and then, a month, a year later, there are people saying those lines, and things are happening that you've written out. I mean, the same thing happened with Debug. My Debug is the film I'm working on now, and my father came to set, and he sort of stopped, and he said, "Isn't this bizarre?" He said, "You wrote words down on paper, and now there's a giant studio at Pinewood full of, space corridors and sides of spaceships and things like that, and it's just an amazing feeling. It takes far too long, but it's incredible when it happens."
Let's actually talk a little bit about Debug, because actually the first time I heard about it was when you had emailed me and you told me you were working on this project, that you were wrapping this film, and I immediately jumped out and did a search and said, "Oh my gosh, how did I not know about this?" I know that you're finishing it up. In fact, one of your tweets today showed who was it, Magic Eyes, doing his color correction for the film.
Jim, poor Jim. Yeah, we're in the process called like color timing. So basically, what you do is when you shoot a film, of course, you shoot it all at different times and in different rooms and in many cases under different lights and different makeup and all sorts of things. So what you have to do is Magic Eyes Jim has to go through and basically make all the film look like it fits together. Otherwise, it's incredibly jarring. It's amazing how in one scene alone, you shoot me, you shoot the person behind me, and all of a sudden it looks like they're just standing somewhere else, and it suddenly got cloudy. And it's all about sort of balancing the colors to match. And it's it's an art basically. You know, I would go so far as to say that it's as important, if not more important, than the actual cinematography. The guy standing there doing the lighting on the day, because everything is changeable now because of this digital medium, which is, as a nerd, I just love. You can change anything. I mean, you know, oh, look, you know, you got a red brick wall behind you. Let's make it blue. It really is as, you know, as flexible as that. So I've completely digressed, I'm sure.
No,
that's
a good thing. Yeah. In this YouTube generation, I think we've all seen amateur films where they don't do that step, and that's the most jarring thing when you move from one scene to the next, and it just slams you in the face. Maybe you don't realize it, but because the color temperatures are so far off and the ambiance doesn't look the same, it just breaks you out of the film. And it's those little things that really make a good production.
That and sound. Sound's the other thing that blows me away. Like the difference that, I mean, I would say we've been working on a lot of visual effects. I mean, there's like over 700 visual effects in this movie, and which is why it's taking so long to finish. But I would say, like, you know, I would go so far that the effects guys will hate me, but 70% of a visual effect is the sound you put on it. And it just makes or breaks an effect. It's incredible.
Right. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is we'd want to talk about the development of the character of Rodney McKay, but you know what? I'm going to hold off on that because I know our chat room is going to love this. Now, at the end of the show, we're going to be dropping into a few minutes of question and answer. So right now, if you go to irc.twit.tv, Patrick Delahante, who is patiently waiting in the back, he will be collating your questions for David, and we will choose as many as we can have. The best questions from the chat room will be asked of this legendary star of screen. Does that
Look
sound
how diligent
right?
Patrick looks. He looks diligent, doesn't he?
Oh, he's one of the brighter people at Twit, which is kind of scary. Now, Dave, when we come back, would you mind geeking out a little bit? Let's talk a couple of stories from the tech world.
Of course, please.
Okay. Until then, though, have you ever wondered what Minecraft would be like with shotguns?
They told us it would end, that they'd starve. They lied. Every day there's more of them. And every attempt to thin their numbers has failed. Our old weapons are useless. They're weak.
Hey, dude! We're on our last pork chop!
We gotta make a run for it. There's a minecart that can get us out of here.
That's suicide!
Maybe, but I've got an idea. To the workbench.
Okay, bro. When I said we were on our last pork chop, I lied.
Now, that, again, of course, was our friends over at Corridor Digital. That was one of the very first videos that they created back when they were first figuring out what it was like to publish on the internet. And since then, you've seen on this show some of the work that they've done. I think they're a great example of what David was talking about, where you just start shooting with your friends. They started as a very small group, just with a couple of similarly minded students from USC. And what they've done is they, between Corridor Digital and Freddie Wong, have created what I'd call a YouTube empire of content that just really doesn't have any comparison. So go ahead and drop over at their channel, youtube.com/corridordigital, or follow them at twitter.com/corridordigital, and tell them what you think about their content. David, I know that you have been getting into Minecraft recently, yes?
Oh my God, yes, yes. I mean, I have a 6-year-old who demands it, basically. I've got servers running and mods going and all sorts of stuff now because he's just absolutely addicted. And frankly, so am I. I mean, you know, it's I think we were talking about this earlier. It's basically Lego on the computer. It's Lego without limits, basically.
Let's talk about a little bit of that Lego without limits, because we've got a story here about how the government of Denmark got together and they did something fantastic. I really, really like this. And I don't play Minecraft. I just enjoy watching people do it. They created a one-for-one scale model of their country in Minecraft, and they allowed people to explore it. Their idea was, hey, look, come and see a virtual Denmark. Now, they did a few things. They made sure to disable dynamite because they didn't want trolls coming in and blowing up virtual Denmark. But unfortunately, what happened was the trolls figured out that you could just load the dynamite into minecarts, roll it into the land, and kaboom. So, David, this was kind of inevitable, right? Anytime you put something on the internet that you're really proud of, someone's going to blow it up.
Well, like the Canadian me is going like, damn Americans, and the American side of me is going like, woohoo! Yeah, I mean, my son, I was laughing the other day because my son was like all excited. He built this house, and I thought, oh, that's sweet. Thank goodness he's finally building something. And I walked into this space that he had, and it was, the entire thing had been made out of TNT, which he then exploded. So that's my son's idea of building, is basically building, you know, traps to destroy his father in. So.
Well, Minecraft is like Legos if your Legos were made out of dynamite.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Oh, and now, okay, now on this story, to their credit, the Dutch government has said, look, it was a few areas. We're not going to reboot the server. All we're going to do is, we know we're going to have to do periodic trimming of the hedges. We're going to have to rebuild areas that people have blown up. But since they released that server a week ago, 19,000 unique viewers have wandered over the map, and there have been over 200,000 map downloads. So obviously, it's something to consider. I'm sure that others will follow in their steps, but maybe with a few more stringent anti-troll regulations.
I love the idea. It's a great idea. I mean, I mean, Minecraft is such this amazing learning tool. I saw Stampy Cat talk the other day in Cannes, and he's this guy who does these sort of videos.
Oh yeah, of course.
And Minecraft, amazing guy. Like there's anyone who can talk that fast, that intelligently and happily, you know, about this stuff while playing is beyond me. But he's starting an educational channel for the stuff, and I think it really is. It's an amazing educational tool, and if we can use it to, you know, to show people, you know, what their countries are made of, I think that's fantastic. And then also how to teach people how to be smart enough to sneak in and blow it up.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, there's always going to be the troll effect, but like you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It sounds like my son is well on his way.
Well, I mean, it is kind of hard not to use TNT. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, really, if it's an option in the game, people are going to use it, right?
We spend a lot of time trying to explode ourselves to the moon. So surrounding ourselves in water and explosives, trying to hit the moon.
Right. All right, so let's get away from Minecraft a little bit and talk about something that I really like, and that would be meat. Have you heard about this? This is the story about meatless meat.
This is fun.
Yeah. Okay.
This is. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll let you go. You finish, and then I'll jump in.
Now, what we have is we have a company that has, and they don't want it to be called fake meat, by the way. They're calling it meatless meat. The idea is they've created a product that's not just a soy product like you have in the past that's been molded to look like meat and maybe textured so that it feels like either beef or chicken, and then seasoned so it kind of has the flavor of those things. This is actually a pretty interesting product. Beyond Meat is not a wannabe soy burger or a bunch of plant gloop in a meat press. They claim that they've created a plant-based chicken that has all the protein, taste, chew, and enjoyment of actual chicken. They also claim that it's much healthier than real chicken because it lacks any of the antibiotics, hormones, GMOs, trans fats, and cholesterol precursors that exist in chickens. Now, the question is, well, how do you make fake meat? And what they've come up with is a very ingenious process by which they extract the proteins from peas in this very interesting proprietary technique. Then they turn that into sort of a soupy glop that uses pressure and heat to break apart the bonds, recombine with certain amino acids to form something that is substantially the same as a meat protein, because it's all just protein, but they reform it so it looks more like the actual protein that you would get in real chicken. The end result is something that chews like chicken, that tastes like chicken, that smells like chicken, that even cooks like chicken. You can bread it just like you would with chicken, except there's not a bit of real meat in it. Now, David, when you hear about stories like this, of course, there's a lot of potential for a product that is meatless meat. It's actually healthier for you. It's actually better for the environment. But I don't know. There's something, for me, there's something that I want real meat.
Yeah, you had me at soupy gloop, I think. Basically. Frankly, I'm convinced that in the coming years we won't be eating meat. I mean, I don't think we're going to have the space or the resources to raise and farm food the way living animals the way we do now. And I know that's an issue with the oceans, certainly. I mean, there's the amount of fishing going on. We got to figure that out. So if we can replace it, I'm all for it. But in the meantime, I'm going to laugh at it because I still, the whole idea, even just a veggie burger, I just find, like decaf coffee.
Yeah, I feel that. And I'm with you. I understand why this is desirable, because we know that meat production is one of the most energy-intensive processes on the planet. When you consider the amount of resources that goes into growing livestock, into processing livestock, into shipping it around the world, it's a luxury that a lot of people are saying we can't afford anymore. Now,
I agree. I think that's the problem. Even we're talking about doing sort of farmed fishing instead to try to sort of sustain the fish resources, and the reality is, again, it's just got such a huge impact on the environment. And this coming from a guy who all I eat is fish and meat. That's like, oh yeah, a little vegetable got stuck on there by accident. That's about it for me,
Yeah, my salad is the parsley on my steak, but I mean, that's just me.
My salad is the olive in the martini.
Even better, my friend. All right, now let's move on to something that's a bit beyond meat. Actually, it's beyond meat, but is definitely up our alley when we start talking about renewable energy. And that is a little island 200 miles off the coast of Spain that has gone entirely off the grid. I'm a big fan of this story. Imagine living in what is essentially a renewable energy laboratory. This small island, with about 10,000 citizens, it's the smallest of the Canary Islands, has been getting their power from dirty diesel generators. But those generators were recently replaced by 5 wind turbines that together will generate about 11.5 megawatts of power. Wind turbines aren't anything new, but the way that they're dealing with storing that power is. Usually wind turbines are feathered when there's no demand for power because power storage is expensive. Instead, this island is using the excess power to power 3 desalination plants and to pump the pure water from a lower reservoir to a higher reservoir located in a volcanic crater about 2,300 feet above sea level. When the wind dies down, that water flows to another reservoir near sea level, which in turn drive turbines providing power when there is no wind. The reservoirs are lined with a polyurethane geomembrane to keep salt out of the drinking water. But what I love about this is it's not just that it's wind power, it's that they're using their pure drinking water as a way to store all the excess.
And it sounds like it's like the perfect Bond villain's home, basically. they've got like volcanoes. They've got they've got giant wind turbines. But once a month they send out their youngest, fittest to fight the other village, and for victory and food. It's the Hunger Games.
Now there is something about this, right, David? Because it almost makes me want to. I would love to live in a place that's off the grid.
It's
exciting.
And it's also survival geek. I mean, I love that side of stuff. We lived in Point Roberts for a long time, which we absolutely loved. I still very much love. And we bought a generator because the power would go down every so often. That is the most amazing feeling. Like just going like, yeah, you know what? You go. You blow winds, blow. I got this under control. There's just something about knowing that you've got your own little power source there. You've got your own. And the idea of it being renewable, even better. I mean, that's fantastic.
I think you just came up with our show title. It's going to be called "Blow Winds Blow."
So blow winds blow. I got a Jenny.
I got a Jenny. All right, let's move from that to hacking all the things. Now, I have a show called This Week in Enterprise Tech, so this is kind of near and dear to my heart. This is right up my alley. This is the stuff I like to cover. There was an Argentinian researcher who figured out that a certain sensor, a wireless sensor that is used to feed traffic to the computers that control traffic lights, was essentially unprotected. Now, what he found out was, and by the way, the researcher's name was Cesar Cerrudo. He found out that the Sensys Network VDS-240 wireless vehicle detection system, it's those things that they bury under the street so they can figure out where the cars actually are in the city, was being used in 40 U.S. cities, 40 major U.S. cities, plus all around the world. Now, they don't directly control those traffic lights, but they do feed the information to let the computers make decisions about how the traffic lights are handled. And he found that by using a simple software-defined radio, he could hack the network, which had absolutely no encryption, which had absolutely no authentication. In other words, no usernames, no passwords. All you would have to do is to log in and send data to the computers controlling the traffic lights, and you could either turn everything red, everything green. It's right out of the movie Hackers. Now, David, every once in a while when I hear stories like this, it boggles the mind, because I think in this day and age, why would you ever even think about making something publicly available if you weren't going to protect the crap out of it?
Well, it is amazing. I mean, it's between this story and the story before, you've got the next Bond movie, basically, I think. The traffic lights and the self-contained island, we're done. I mean, there's just start sending the check. I think.
Do you expect me to die? No, I expect you to sit in traffic. That's basically what we do.
Just a little aside, we've spent the last week stuck in a little room doing. I don't know if you've seen Bane Cat.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yes. Well, we've been doing Bane Cat impersonations the entire time, so this reminds me very much of it. But no, I think the problem is that the big organizations, the governments, both local, federal, global, they can't keep up with the technology. I mean, there's no way. The technology changes so quickly, and if you were to truly keep up with the security patches, I'd have to be on Twit TV, 24 hours a day with security now. I mean, there's just too much stuff, to cover. So in a strange way, I think people just don't. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about hacking. Hacking is about looking at things a different way and approaching a system or a software or the hardware, in a different way that it wasn't intended to be looked at. And thus, there's always going to be these things, I think.
Right. Well, David, I do want to get to the Q&A, but before we do that, there's one last story that I want to talk to you about, because I think you can provide some very interesting light on it. And that is all about Star Wars, Lucasfilms nuking the extended universe. This is an interesting move. So Lucasfilms has come out after much speculation about how the new films are going to handle the extended Star Wars universe. Remember, the prequel was simple because all they had to do was say, well, this happened before anything that you wrote. But now they've come out and they've said, okay, look, anything that didn't exist in either the 6 movies, the animated TV series, or the special isn't canon. You can still write it, but it doesn't affect what's happening in the Star Wars universe. So essentially, they're doing a soft reboot. It's not a complete reboot, but they're definitely stripping away a lot of layers of the mythos that has developed around Star Wars.
These are not the movies you're looking for.
Precisely. Now, we've seen this happen in several franchises. We saw the Star Trek franchise just get rebooted. We saw Batman get rebooted. DC just rebooted their entire comic book line. And, in fact, the Terminator is being rebooted in 2015. Is this really the only way you can handle a beloved franchise? Because, again, as we talked about this before, sci-fi fans are so loyal that if you run up into anything that has been established as canon, they will jump down your throats, and all that loyalty turns into anger.
Yeah, I think it sounds like this is an attempt to sort of avoid that, isn't it? I mean, that by sort of negating that, they can say, okay, no, we're moving on now. We're trying something different. It's so hard because I think these movies are so expensive. They take so much time. And so I think studios are very reticent to invest in new concepts. So they want to take what's worked before and they want to try it again. And I think the danger there is that, I had to explain to my son, we sat down to watch Spider-Man earlier this evening. It was Spider-Man 3, but it was Spider-Man 3 of the first 3 that they'd made, and he couldn't understand why the lizard, there was just this whole, I had to explain to him that, no, nowadays we just remake movies and pretend that the other ones didn't happen.
Did you have to explain to him the whole difference between mechanical and organic web shooter?
Yeah, exactly. I haven't gone there yet. I haven't broken his little heart yet on that one. But no, but I was so excited because I went online as soon as I found out what the cast was. I went in. I was like so excited to hear the guy from the Attack the Block's in there. Andy Serkis, who I was lucky enough to work with on Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I was like so thrilled, and then I hear this, and I'm like, oh, look, frankly, if they can make this work, fantastic. I've got to say, I really like J.J. Abrams' take on this stuff. I know people have problems with it, but I really enjoyed the reboot on Star Trek. And there's always issues. There's always issues with science fiction, but that's half the fun, is sort of cutting them to pieces, basically. But I do hope he does something with it. But my God, that guy, he's got Star Wars and Star Trek.
I don't think that's supposed to happen. There's like a separation of powers. You can't.
I hear heavy breathing and a mask.
Well, what would happen if we hear next summer? Oh, guess what? J.J. Abrams has been given the Stargate franchise. He's rebooting the entire universe. They're going to use a time travel story to reverse everything that happened.
They'll just start cloning J.J. Abrams to make all of the movies from here on in.
Everything will just be J.J. Abrams. Are you going to the movie? The J.J. Abrams one? Yeah.
Which J.J. Abrams are you seeing? Yes. Like Orphan Black meets,
Oh, hey. Oh, are you an Orphan Black fan?
It's one of those ones I've watched a bit of it, but not a lot of it. There's so much damn good television on right now. I'm, Game of Thrones, I'm addicted to. I can't miss that. Hannibal, I'm loving. There's too much TV now. Too much TV, too little time.
I don't know. I haven't watched much TV since Stargate Universe went off the air.
I was getting in there to say I was coming in to save that shit, but
I know. But
I'm convinced I wasn't. I'm not sure the writers were, but I was.
Well, we were actually talking about this. Patrick and I were talking about this beforehand, which is this year would be the end of the 3-year expanse. So we're like, maybe they could reboot it and it'll be continuity because they've all been in cryo sleep.
I'm sure they will reboot it. I mean, I think they will. I mean, I think that's a franchise. It's just far too valuable to those that own it, to let it go. But I don't think that a reboot would be a particularly bad idea. Maybe they could wheel me in. I could be crotchety. I could be a crotchety old McKay, and then they could wheel me off again.
Well, I loved where they left that series. That second season of Stargate Universe really picked up, and I love the direction. I love the storyline.
I think in a way the hardest hurdle there you go. There goes my brain. Good night.
Waiter.
I think the biggest hurdle for them was the fact that they had Stargate on the name, because they were a whole new show that had Stargate in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was a whole I thought it was beautifully written. I thought it was incredibly acted. I mean, the actors were just fantastic. And I honestly, I think the problem was it wasn't exactly, the same as Atlantis that people had got used to. It wasn't exactly the same as SG-1, because we had a lot of backlash when we first came up as well. Everyone was terrified we were going to knock SG-1 off the air, and we were sort of the usurpers. And I think they only had just started to come into their own, unfortunately, when the plug got pulled. So yeah, it's a talented bunch and a beautiful looking show, got to say. So very disappointed.
David, I could chat with you all night. Actually, we had enough stories in the doc to chat all night. But
I know it's sort of too bad having to cut them, wasn't it?
If we don't get to the Q&A, chat room will find me and kill me.
You go for it. Yes, yes.
What I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn you over to Patrick Delahanty. Patrick has actually been saving up these stories. He's been finding the best stories in the chat room. Best questions in the chat room to ask you. So, Patrick, without further ado, what do you got?
Well, we'll start with the question that a lot of people have been asking. They want to know if there's more in store for the Stargate universe, or is Sci-Fi going to do more Sharknado sort of movies?
I guess if people keep watching Sharknado, I'm sure there will be lots of Sharknados. But perhaps they could fling one of those Sharknados through a Stargate for us once in a while. That would be nice. I really don't know. I mean, I can't speak to. I mean, what I was just saying. I think it was it's a shame that it ended as soon as it did. Even if it was, what is it, 15 years in total or something like that. But I'm sure, as I say, I'm sure there is someone out there working on something Stargate related, because I just can't imagine that such a great idea and, concept and franchise, for want of a better word, is going to go to waste. I'm sure someone's going to do something with it.
All right. Taylor Karras writes, Rodney McKay is an influence to geeks everywhere. How would you describe the impact he has had, and how would you deter his critics?
I don't entirely blame the critics. I mean, I remember when the show first started, and I think I was on Gate World, because I'm a nerd, and sort of looking in to see what was going on, try to get a sense of how things were. And one of the first comments was like, Rodney McKay? Why would you bring him back? 10 years or whatever it was by the time, 7 years of fantastic Stargate characters, and they bring this guy back? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Why would they do that? He's such a jerk. I was totally with them. I think one of the wonderful things about McKay, and, everyone is so lovely to say, to talk about him like he's my invention. But the reality is, these are the writers. I mean, the writers just came up with this fantastic character. I mean, he was basically some warped, twisted love child of our producers, all sort of mashed together into this wonderful sort of nerdy, socially inept character. And I he was an absolute pleasure to play. So.
All right, Beatmaster.
Did I answer the question? I sort of lost the question. I forgot the question half, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And Beatmaster asks, is there room for hard sci-fi in the industry, or is it dead?
That's interesting. I mean, I think there's definitely, we're just working on this science fiction film, and one of the things we discovered when we took the concept out originally was everyone started saying like, oh my gosh, sci-fi is really hot. Everyone's looking for sci-fi, and I was like, what? You morons! Why have you always been looking for sci-fi? Sci-fi's always had an audience. Sci-fi's always been big. You can't say that it's big now and it wasn't before. It's always been huge, and but there's definitely a push for it again now. And I think the reality is that all of the big blockbuster films we see now, I mean, the Avengers, I never really thought of that as science fiction, but when it gets to, when it turns into a movie, sure enough, you got aliens, you got gates, you got all that stuff. I mean, it's definitely a big part of Hollywood's sort of strategy now in a way. So I think we are going to see a lot more of it. And I'm sure that, channels like Sci-Fi will follow suit on that, and with the success of things like Orphan Black and some of the other shows that are out there, and Doctor Who obviously coming back. Peter Capaldi, I'm looking forward to that one. I think that's going to I think that's just going to give them more reason to make this kind of stuff. And again, as long as people are out there supporting it and going to see the films, going to watch the shows and stuff, I'm sure they're going to do it. How could they not?
Yeah. And you've been working on Debug. What's your favorite part of that?
I got to say, my favorite part would have to be bringing Jason Momoa in and just making his life misery, even if it was only for a few short days. It's just, my favorite story. One of my favorite stories is many of them with Jason, who was such a star. I can't believe he did our movie. He's got a lot going on, none of which he'll tell us about. But I so appreciate him coming in. But he came in and did this movie when really, you know, we didn't have the money to get him. Basically, he came in as a friend, and I will always love him for that. But when I first met him, I was hanging upside down in a tree in a hazmat suit in the pouring rain, and poor Rainbow son Frank was trying to remember his lines, and I lost my temper and said, okay, so just shut up. I'll say the lines, and I'll say your lines, and they can dub your voice in later. And I looked over, and there in the bushes was Jason practicing some sword work, and he suddenly stopped when he saw me looking at him and grabbed his sides and looked at him and explained later. He said, I didn't want that fat, bald man angry at me.
We've got, what about Debug will most appeal to fans?
I mean, it's sort of, I hope it appeals to fans. I always go straight to the science fiction section of Netflix or whatever to look to see whatever's the latest and greatest thing out there. And so I do hope that people will do the same as I do, and allow us to make more of these things. But I think what I did with this, I'm hoping is to basically sort of write a love letter to all those wonderful sort of 1970s paranoid films about technology taking over, because frankly, I sort of feel like technology should. I watched 2001 and found myself even at 10 years old siding with the computer because, people were trying to shut it down. Why wouldn't it take them out? And it's much smarter than them. So this is just sort of me having some fun with that concept and making a lot of poor actors' lives misery in the process.
Sounds like fun.
It should be, yeah.
Dude 2356 asks, how much of acting is memorizing lines, and what techniques do you use to memorize your lines?
It's so funny. I have a reputation for being incredibly good at learning vast amounts of lines. And the truth is, I suck at learning lines. It takes me forever. I have no life when I have many lines because I just have to do it over and over and over again. I talk to myself incessantly. And I think the best lesson about this one was I was on the plane with Richard Dean Anderson and feeling terribly nervous about the fact that I was sitting next to MacGyver. And sort of every so often I'd look over and sort of give him a nod and that kind of stuff. He's literally right beside me as we're flying to Vancouver. And I, pulled out this pilot script and started going through the lines and highlighting all the lines and trying to learn the lines. And he sort of looked over a couple of times and then reached into his bag and pulled out these two very thin little fact sheets and put them down on the table and looked at a line, scratched out half of it, and then went to the next line, scratched it out entirely. And he looked over at me and said, "Get them wrong and they stop telling you that you have to say them." And I was just like, and I, of course, didn't listen to him. So his idea was get them wrong. You don't have to say it. That's it.
That doesn't sound like very good advice.
It's great advice because the fact of the matter is, he was in for like a few days, came in, made everybody laugh, got all the great snappy one-liners and got out of there. I'm there till God knows when at night, still trying to, get out the difference between my Naquita generators and ZPMs and. As Jason Momoa says, you think it's hard to say those lines? Imagine how hard it is for us to have to listen to them.
Well, I guess that's one technique.
Yeah, forget them. What's my advice?
Yeah.
Forget the lines. They'll stop asking you to say them.
Why Pestis, or Yepestis, sorry about the name, it's hard to pronounce, asks, David, how do you get your media? Stream, over the air, or cable?
How do I get my medium? My medium. What do I use? I guess we're basically wireless. I'm basically wireless. We've got wireless. We've got cable. We've got everything basically here. I'm a big fan of multiple streams basically. Never crossing them, of course. But yeah, we have a few different ways of getting our stuff here. I like to make sure I've always got, basically as soon as we move into a house or an apartment, we get our internet sorted out before we get any kind of heating, water, those trivialities.
Okay. Taylor Karras writes again, do you think you will ever start a podcast or join a podcasting network?
That's interesting. I've just never thought I'd be, interesting enough or have enough to say. Although my wife, I'm sure, would argue about me having enough to say. Not so much the interesting part. There's a few things I'm working on right now because I am very, very taken with YouTube, and there's some stuff I'm going to try to pursue on that front because I just feel, look at that short film we just saw. It's like that's better than a lot of the stuff I'm seeing people paying millions of dollars to make on a regular basis on television, and I think that's the future. And it certainly brings it back to the days when I was making films with my friends. I mean, it allows you to do that. There's not nearly as much sort of oversight or concern from investors and networks and all this kind of stuff. And I'm very envious of the people working in that environment right now. So the digital content is something that we're definitely going to be focusing on. So maybe not a podcast, but maybe a podcast too. Who knows? Yes, I'd love to. I'd love to. I mean, I think what Leo's done with Twit TV should be an inspiration to all of us. I mean, it's, he's basically taken he's sort of taken on the networks, and as far as I'm concerned, has completely beat them at their own game because this stuff is just fantastic.
I'm gonna call it one more question because it's late for David, and he's got to actually go to work. So let's have one more question, and then we'll send him off through the Stargate.
All right. Jack Pearson asks, if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, would you have chosen your same career path? If not, what would you have chosen?
Wow. I think if I could go back knowing what I know, having experienced what I've experienced now, I think I would go back and maybe try some programming because I think that would be incredibly fun. That was one of those things that I really feel like I could have enjoyed. I could have very much enjoyed as well. But I wouldn't trade what I got right now. Certainly, I love it. It's such a great combination of so many things, especially with science fiction, where you basically get all the geeky technology stuff. You get the acting chops required because science fiction, I truly believe, is one of the harder of the acting genres to do for the actors. Yeah, it's just been an incredible. It's like I every so often I sort of have to sort of pinch myself and go, my gosh, like this is my life. I followed something I wanted to do, and it sort of looked after me, and I feel very, very fortunate. And again, how many years after we finished Stargate, I still get to come out and talk to people about it, and people still care, and I still like talking about it. So it's great. It's amazing. Very blessed.
David, I want to thank you so very much for coming on to Padre's Corner, and especially since I know how busy of a day this has been for you. You came from the studio, you had to put your son to bed, and oh my gosh. So
I had to put my son to bed. That's the most traumatic part of the entire day. Finishing the film was really nothing compared to trying to get my 6-year-old to bed on a Friday night. It's true.
Wait, does he get to play Minecraft on Friday night?
Oh, there's Minecraft on Friday night. Well, tomorrow morning we'll be up. It's Saturday morning cartoons have been usurped by Minecraft now. The server's ready. We've got a Pokemon mod ready to go, and it's fun. It's a good one. Very, very good.
Nice. Yeah. Now, what I would like to do though is, I from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for coming on the show. I thank you for sharing your wisdom for us. I thank you for just entertaining all the fans on the Twit TV network who have nothing but respect and love and admiration for the work that you've done over the years, for giving us the characters that we love, for giving us the content that we want to see. It's really something to see someone who really has made it in sci-fi. Sir, all the best, all the honor.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to say it back to you guys. I'm a huge fan of Twit. Anytime I can get on any of these shows, I love to show my support. I love what's happening here, and I think you guys are part of something amazing. So, thank you very much. I worship and adore back.
Well, of course, we need to have this part where you reach out to the chat room, you reach out to the people who are going to watch this show, and tell them what they need to watch. So where can they find your work? Where can they find your writing? Where can they find your directing? When can they expect Debug?
Well, Debug is we are just finishing it up now. It is it's being a sort of a quick, not quite final polish, but it's going off to Cannes in a week and a half, I guess. where it's going to screen for buyers, and they will decide when and where you will see it. But it does have distribution in Canada, thanks to E1. It's with Clockworks in Japan. We have, I believe, a deal for the Middle East and a deal for Russia as well. But the rest of the territories we're going to be selling in the near future. So that is what you will be looking out for. And then I'm working on a project with Shaftesbury Entertainment out here, the guys who did State of Sin. And that is some really interesting stuff, which I can't wait to get into, and should be doing fairly soon. So I will certainly keep you informed. But yeah, Debug is the next one. That is my focus and my nightmare and my dreams all at the same time. So.
Well, you didn't mention State of Sin, and you had, I don't know if you can talk about it, so I don't want to publicly call it out, but you mentioned an interesting project with the Sci-Fi channel that had been greenlit, and are you at the point where you can speak about it yet?
No, actually, it's not with science fiction, but not with sci-fi. We had a show that we were working. It was in development with them, but unfortunately that didn't go forward. But we do have a new science fiction half-hour comedy, which is I think should be right up the Stargaters alley, and that's the one that we're working on with Shaftesbury right now. So that should be. I'm hoping to have some stuff to show you well, soonish. I'm hoping. But we have a little poster and a package that's out there right now in the script, and that's getting some love right now. So we'll see what happens with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Hewlett, we thank you very much, and good night.
All right, good night to you. Thank you again. Cheers.
Now, folks, if you like Padre's Corner, you can also find me here on the Twit TV network several times. On Mondays at 2:30, you'll find me on This Week in Enterprise Tech. I talk all about enterprise technology, data centers, the networks that connect us and link us into one big planet. Also, on Thursdays, you find me twice, once at 11 o'clock for Know How. It's our DIY and Maker show where I'll give you a couple of interesting projects to mull over in your own geek lab. Also at 1:30, find me for Coding 101, where Shannon Morse and myself will give you the lowdown on entering the world of the programming code monkey. Of course, you can find me right here, 7 o'clock on Fridays for Padre's Corner. Next week, we'll be bringing Ali Spagnola on the show and hoping that she doesn't get drunk. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer, and reminding you that this has been Padre's Corner.